Hello, socially distanced greetings to you in San Diego. This is Danny Ben-Moshe. I'm a documentary filmmaker, writer, director, and producer. English, as you may be able to tell by the accent, but located in Australia. And it certainly feels like I'm on an island right now with us all in lockdown, but so good wishes to all of you. And I understand that's kind of part of the inspiration for the lovely people at the San Diego Jewish Film Festival coming up with this idea of these videos that I believe are being shared with you from various filmmakers in various parts of our coronavirus inflicted world. So we may have had the opportunity to chat or at least share ideas previously. I think films of mine such as Code of Silence about child sex abuse in the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, Shalom Bollywood, the untold story of Indian cinema, and possibly My Mother's Lost Children. A few of my films I recall have been shown at the festival over the years, so it's great to have that association and to keep it going in these unusual times. So Paul at the festival gave me a list of suggestions of things to speak about, but basically said you can also say whatever you like, which is a dangerous thing to say to a filmmaker. So I thought rather than perhaps recapping over some of my past films, which you may have seen, and this is not an advertorial, but you can check them out on my website, identity-films.com. I thought I might talk to you about my latest film, and Outback Rabbis, which wasn't on at the festival. You can catch it on Amazon Prime, I think it is. Outback Rabbis, it's called. And the reason why I mentioned that film is because I thought it'd be a good film to mention because you're all, I assume, bunkered down at home, and Outback Rabbis is a road trip. It's a road trip to the heart of Australia, to iconic Uluru, um, where Chabad rabbis and their families go out into the bush on the search for Jews. Now, as a filmmaker, sometimes um, people say, where do you go and find your stories? Where do you get them from? And I say, it's not like that. The stories come to you. Um, it's Australia Day. It's a Easter holiday in Australia, and the neighbours are banging lots of things as Australians are wont to do with their renovation habits, pastimes. So hopefully that's not a distraction. So as I was saying, the ideas kind of come to you. The stories choose you rather than you choosing the story. And I read about 15 odd years ago an article about this group called Ra Rabbis, rabbis of rural and regional Australia who are a Chabad, Lubavitch group who go out looking for Jews in the outback of Australia. And I thought, wow, there's a great story. And I tried to make that film about 15 years ago. And I won't be the first or last filmmaker to have an idea for a film that never gets made. The vagaries of finance and distribution and platforms. Anyway, but sometimes an idea sticks. And an opportunity came available a couple of years ago now when a strand, TV stations have kind of different strands for programs, and there was this new series called Australia Uncovered on one of our channels, a sort of PBS equivalent channel over here called SBS, where they were looking for stories that tell you about parts of the Australian community that people otherwise wouldn't know. And I thought, hey, Rabbis on a Road Trip could be that. And so that is how I got the opportunity. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to make a film. So that gave me an opportunity to make that film, which I now did, and which could kill about an hour and 15 minutes of your social isolation time at home should you wish to watch it. However, I mention it not because I want you to go and watch it, but if you do and you like it, let me know. But also because there are many different types of stories that we can tell. And, it's really interesting. It's Pesach time, right? We're in Chol Hamoed when I'm sitting here making this video, just 2 or 3 days out of Seder nights. And we began as a people with a story. I mean, not just any old story, but the story of the Yetziat Mitzrayim, of the Exodus, and of Moshe. And our whole experience as a people is an incredible story. And so for me as a storyteller, I turn to Jewish stories, as most, but not all of my films, but most are, because they are so, one, as a filmmaker, you have to tell a story that's something that is you feel passionate about and connected to in some way. And not all my stories are Jewish, but a lot are, because I think you have to love your story to do it justice. Where you may sit at home or go into a cinema and spend 1 to 2 hours watching a film, that film will probably be a minimum of 2, 3, easily 4, 5 years of a filmmaker's life. Obviously not full time, but it takes a long time to develop a film, to get into production, to shoot it, to edit it, to distribute it. Probably 3 years is an average time frame for most of my 1.5 hour films. So you've really got to love the story, and I think you've got to have a passion for your story, so it's got to matter to you in some way. And that's why I probably keep getting drawn to Jewish stories. Also, you have to be kind of slightly realistic in terms of, I have ideas now. I was just reading about this Jewish astronaut, Jessica Meyer or something like that. And so I thought, oh, what a great film that would be, Jews in space. But, you know, the idea and then the reality are two different things. I'm located in Melbourne, Australia. These rabbis hit the road in their mitzvah tanks out of Melbourne and a couple of other spots, but, you know, relatively short distance in terms of 3 hour flying time from where I live. So it was viable, because you can have an idea, but how do you make it into reality? And how do you make it into reality? There are several considerations as a filmmaker. One is, don't make a film when the neighbours are sawing and drilling, but hopefully you can't hear it. One is, you've got to have access. Access is the key. You know, sometimes people say to me, oh, you should make a film about this person or that subject. And it's like, how do I even gain an entry to that person, to that world? So that's one. And a second thing, and that flows on from that, is you've got to have the trust and the relationships. If a documentary, as opposed to a news or current affair piece, you're going to go on a journey with someone, you have to have a relationship with them. And building relationships, building the trust that comes with relationships, takes time. And films, the films I make, documentary films, they're shot over an extended period. So you can build that trust, you can build the relationships, and then you get the truth and the honesty and the real windows into the world. So there's many different styles of film, of course. You know, you'll have presenter-led films, you'll have animated films, you will have observational documentaries. And when I heard about the Rabbis, the rabbis of rural regional Australia, I thought, hey, road trip movie, why not? And we're talking about visual language. And in this country that is a continent called Australia, where rabbis are literally going on the road for weeks at end, the terrain, the visual imagery. In this film, I had to think of the landscape, or I thought of the landscape, as a character in the film. It's not just the rabbis and their families who we are following, and the Jews that they meet, or almost meet, along the way. But it's also the places, the landscape is a character. So to me, this was sort of very fertile territory to make a film. And obviously with a film, you need a beginning, a middle, and an end. An arc, as they would say in filmmaking parlance. And a road trip, you know, that planes, trains, and automobiles thing, gives you that perfect arc. You set out on a journey, you head through certain places, and you're going on a destination. And will you get there? And what will you find on the way? Now, one of the wonderful things about being a documentary filmmaker is also one of the worst things, which is you never know what you're going to find and quite when that magical moment will happen. And sometimes you're unprepared and something happens and you miss it. Yet it's counterbalanced by sometimes you're just hanging in an area, you've got your camera rolling, and you wonder what's going to happen, and something great does happen. And it's that genuineness and authenticity about the documentary form that so appeals to me. So, Outback Rabbis had all the ingredients, an opportunity to make it, and it's just kind of Jewish road trip like no other. It's the only road trip documentary I've made. I still did it in that observational form, but with a clear kind of structure of where we're going, literally, geographically. So that's really what I wanted to share a few words for you about, because one, it's a film that I've kind of just recently finished and been released, and two, because hey, I think we all need a bit of a road trip and some going to beautiful beaches and beautiful rainforests at this time. Um, the next film I'm making, just to share a couple of thoughts with you, hopefully you'll get to see it one day at the San Diego Jewish Film Festival. It's called Revenge. The subtitle is "My Dad the Nazi Killer?" question mark. And this is another example of a way a story came to me, um, which is someone asked me if I could help them do some research for personal purposes because they knew I was a filmmaker, and I did, and as a result of being a filmmaker, I would do a lot of research, particularly for Jewish stories. And their story was it was a middle-aged Jewish guy, kind of my age, um, who, after his father passed away, he knew his father was a partisan in the Second World War, found out, and his other relatives knew this, or they all overheard. He had a much older brother and a much older cousin by like 15, 20 years. That in the 1950s, his father, who was a partisan, who we now know was a partisan you did not want to mess with, um, went to Sydney in the 1950s to knock off or murder a Nazi war criminal. And the son was like, "What? My dad? He was born when his dad was in his 50s. His first memories of his dad was when he was in his 60s. And so his dad was a quieter, calmer, slower man. Um, but apparently, when his dad was in his 20s and his 30s, he was quite a forceful character. So the son is on this quest to find out, did my dad indeed kill a Nazi? If so, who was that Nazi? We've only got a couple of clues, but along the way, I'm making this film for the BBC. Just to give you a sense of time frame, probably spent a year to get the film commissioned, maybe a little bit more, from the idea to development. So you shoot a little bit of stuff, see if you've got a story there, write a bit of stuff, try and get clarity on what the film might look like. It's a bit over a year just to get it commissioned, and then it will probably be nothing to do with the coronavirus. It'll only be beginning of 2021 that we'd be able to start shooting by the time that we contract and finance and get everything, do all our planning in place. So again, about a 3 or so year turnaround for the film. But what we found is in doing our development is your sort of first phase where you sort of test the waters, see what characters are like on camera, see if the story will fly, is it turns out that the father was the head of a vigilante network in Australia. So what we thought, and rather than one Nazi being killed down here, it might have been quite a few. And so rather than this lone wolf act, it was a group of Holocaust survivor and partisan vigilantes. And of course, Australia has the highest number of Holocaust survivors anywhere in the world outside of Israel, and numerically the largest number of East and Central Europeans anywhere, 175,000, certainly proportionally per capita. And by the Australian government's own records, over 4,000 Nazi war criminals made it here. So again, it's a very fertile space for telling a story that has a bigger universality. Um, I've been led to believe similar things, revenge actions happened in America as well. And I have found out that the father of this son um, went to America in the 60s and was on the front page of Yiddish language newspapers in America talking about the partisans' activities. And I wonder, and I haven't explored this yet, whether Boris, the character here, had ties to other revenge actions or actors in America. That's something I haven't even begun to research. But really, what that tells you is a story kind of grows. Like it begins, this was a story about a son trying to find out about his father. Then it opens up into this kind of um, about vigilantes in Australia. And then I find this article about America, and it might grow to be a much bigger story or not. I don't know. That's sometimes the luck of the draw you have as a filmmaker. But certainly, if any of you out there know anything about vigilante actions that happened in the 50s and 60s against SS or other Nazi war criminals in the States, please do let me know. Anyway, that's probably more than enough for now. So I wish you well with the lockdown. The situation looks quite terrible in America from afar. I think in Australia we've been lucky in that we've had a government that has been very driven by the science, really took no risks in locking everyone down very early on, very strictly, and as a result, as you probably know from the news, we've only had about 50 deaths, I think it is. So may that all end for everyone everywhere speedily. Let the message of Pesach, of oppression to freedom, happen as we go from lockdown to post coronavirus, and we all end up wiser, enriched, more inspired, and we will have opportunities to engage on a big screen or maybe even person in film. So you can, if you can check out my stuff on www.identity-films.com. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook, Danny Ben-Moshe. I think it's Danny B_M. And Outback Rabbis is on Amazon Prime. So thank you and shalom.